Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode after our summit. We successfully finished a summit with Rwanda, and now we have our regular session. We have our world famous speakers, Professor David Smith, Mr. David Schumacher, and Markley. We will discuss about cybersecurity. I want to start from Mr. David Schumacher.
Yeah, good morning, Sharif. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Interesting topic, of course, as they all are that Sharif picks. But this is one that we all in the computer business especially need to really pay attention to for the coming years. First, let me define what I'm talking about. Post-quantum cryptography is the study of crypto systems that can be run on conventional and quantum computers that are sufficient for securing the data that's on those systems. So why are we talking about this? Well, crypto security is something I think that a lot of people really take for granted because we use it every day as we connect on the internet, but it's a blind process to us as users of the system. Our data goes out and it's essentially put into a very hard to break or very hard to process computer problem. And it's keyed either in a peer-to-peer system or or an asymmetrical system where you have a public key and a private key. And if you have that information, you could easily break down and decode what the data is and use that. And that happens to our data all the time. But the force of this, or the crux of this, is the fact that these large-scale quantum computers, which are probably in our future, can take and run through those hard-to-break problems very, very quickly. For example, a computer that we currently have, a 64-bit computer, trying to break the algorithms that we use today would take on the order of thousands of years or more to be able to run through all the possible combinations to break in and take apart this code. But a sufficiently sized quantum computer can do it in a very short period of time. Back in 2015, here in the United States, the National Security Agency first published warnings about this. And since then, the National Institute of Standards here has started working on establishing parameters that we can use in this age when quantum computers become available. How soon might that be? Well, large-scale quantum computers, estimation somewhere in the range of 10 years. That's probably a pretty iffy idea of when that might happen. So that would be in the neighborhood of, say, maybe a 4,000 qubit computer. But IBM is looking and feels that they are on track to be able to develop a 1,000 qubit computer as early as 2023. I personally think that once that happens, that a lot of the fundamental challenges will have a good idea about and will be able to scale up at a pretty fast rate. So maybe 10 years might even be a long projection before this can happen. So why is that an issue? Well, I looked up an example. So if you took a 2048-bit encryption, which is used today to secure, for example, cloud data, a conventional computer would need about 3 trillion years to run through all the possible combinations to be able to break that code. That 4,000-bit quantum computer could do this in about 10 seconds. This gives you an idea of how dramatic the difference would be for being able to break these keys. It's not all doom and gloom, though, because there are some type of math problems that can be used today that would make it even difficult for quantum computers to be able to decipher. So there's a recommendation to be able to use some of this technology plus some of the current technology that we're using in a hybrid system to try to be able to protect data, because we probably won't know if there are bad actors out there that have this technology. We won't know until it becomes apparent that they are able to break the codes. So a hybrid system with what we have today is a good idea, but National Institute of Standards is working on standards for this, and they're about 2 years away from what I last read about them being able to publish a standard that we can use. So we're using technology in the hopes, we're using technology that can help protect us in the hope that at some future point that data will be safe. But there's one more thing to consider before I gave up the microphone to somebody else, and that's this idea of being able to capture data today. What the idea is that I will be able to have a quantum computer be able to break the encryption on it within a few years. So even data being transmitted today needs to be protected from the quantum computer technology. So what can you do? In the business that I've been in for a long time, we look at these things and we take a risk assessment. We rack and stack our priorities as far as what's most important to protect. And then we start looking at our resources. And to me, it looks like hardware resources is going to be something that will be a huge problem, because being able to run algorithms to be able to protect us in the quantum state on a conventional computer is going to require some pretty heavy lifting on the hardware part. So it gets into practical aspects of budgeting, planning timeframes, segregating our data, and being careful with what we put out there. So there's a warning on the horizon, but there's things that we can do today, and it all starts with preparing right now. Thank you, Sharif. That's my introduction.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. David Schumacher. Now I request Mr. David Smith.
David, I loved your introduction there. I got into looking at where quantum computing was going back in the very early 90s and did a forecast and roadmap for one of the U.S. intelligence agencies on it. And it was really interesting looking at where this is going and how the impacts are going to go and how pervasive the impacts are going to be across all of society. Because we really base our society on reasonable degrees of security. And e-commerce, which is really driving post-COVID commerce, is based 100% on the idea of cryptography and having the security and privacy that is necessary there. Now, David began to talk about the different about the levels of quantum computing and how they're going to be able to impact our future. The quantum computing market really today is about the same size as the supercomputer market, which is going to be around about $60 billion. And I agree with David that in about 10 years, that we're going to see our first general purpose quantum computer. But there's a lot of different types of quantum computers. The one that you see out there most today is called a noisy intermediate scale quantum computer. And one of the companies that's distributing that commercially is called D-Wave. And you know, that noisy is kind of this funny one. I call it quantum computing like, because it's not truly what we think quantum computing is going to be as we go to the future. And you begin to see them. Where we really are today is you're going to have a quantum annealer, and that's these noisy ones, kind of where we are today. And you're seeing IBM and others coming out with other forms of it. Google made an announcement last year that they had achieved quantum computing superiority using a noisy intermediate scale. And IBM came out and said, no, that's not a real quantum computer. We're going to be going from the quantum annealer to an analog quantum and then to universal quantum. And we're not going to see the universal quantum really until the 2030s, is my forecast on that one. And that's the point where it's going to be real easy to do the things David mentioned, of being able to crack the codes and things at that level. There's so much you can talk about this that it's hard to put the elements in place on it. But the big thing is you need to put together a quantum computer sufficient size and complexity that can execute Shor's algorithm, which is a proven algorithm that can defeat factorized encryption. And there's several different types of encryption. There's asymmetrical and symmetrical encryption. And those are the ones that are going back and forth, and where NIST is striving to put the targets in place for the standards. And it is really looking at how to begin to put these in a place that can work with us. And it's a cat and a mouse game. And I love some of the questions. Is quantum computing, is quantum cryptography a risk? I want to take it that way as opposed to quantum computing. Quantum computing is really optimized for crunching numbers. It is, the question was asked, what's some of the differences? It is a serialized process of computing versus some of the parallel processes of computing. You see things with like neural networks, but it can do it really well. And what quantum computing does is it takes the use of quantum effects to be able to have more than a 0 and 1. Classic computing is really computing with zeros and ones. It's binary computing. Quantum computing changes that into multiple states. And a single bit, instead of being a 0 or a 1, can be in 3 states at the same time. And it's seen there. Now, where is some of the big challenges right now? The United States and Europe are actually lagging behind in quantum computing right now. China just very, very recently announced that they have the top of the class in quantum computing. There was a recent study released, just a few in June, that the University of Science and Technology in China has said they have created a quantum computer that's 1 million times faster than the quantum computers we have at Google and at IBM today. And what's interesting about their announcement is not only it's faster, but it uses multiple different technologies to get there. It uses both quantum, photonic, and superconducting technologies to get to that speed. And if I'm running that fast on a quantum computer, it will break every one of our crypto standards today that are based on a public key. And you begin to see what is the impact of that. How can I ship money internationally if I have the ability to unencrypt it very fast and very willing? And it's going to be the use of quantum-based cryptography for decrypting it is going to be a security challenge anywhere today. But on the other hand, beginning to use quantum-based computing to generate a next-generation cryptography system with many more keys, many more variabilities, and with an asymmetrical approach to cryptography is going to be the protection side. So it's a cat and mouse game. Who can have the tougher encryption versus who can get fast enough to break that encryption? So that's that's kind of where I think my starting point is.
Thank you, Mr. Jason.
Oh yeah, I don't really have a whole lot to say. Actually, I'm liking the idea of learning from the two Davids. I love both these guys; they're super smart. So is there any possibility we could go back maybe and explain like from the I don't know around the double slit experiment area how quantum computers are different from regular computers? For like maybe third grade level. Back to you. No, nobody.
No.
Uh,
Uh,
well, sure. Um, it's really hard to take quantum computers and really make it compared to classical CMOS, is it? Because the real difference is classic computing stores information in zeros and ones, and and that storing it in zeros and ones is really there. So that's where you get the word bits. So in classic computing, you have the number of bits you're using. In quantum computing, you go from bits to qubits, where it is either a 0 or a 1, or it can be 1 and 0 at the same time. And, that is really the difference in the simplest way to put it. But the more states I can have it in, the faster I can go and the more complex I can compute. So that's
they call it
third grade.
Quantum because of the fact that there could be a superposition of the numbers because it could be 0 or 1 or anything, and that's kind of like
quantum effects to do that.
Right. Okay. Cool.
And it's the way it does that. It uses something called superpositioning and entanglement. And the superpositioning is the concept where it represents a 0 or 1 or both at the same time. And entanglement is where it gets real interesting. It's where two qubits that are superpositioned with each other depend on each other to do things. And that entanglement is what makes it really very, very fast because it correlates with each other and works with each other. And as I can entangle more of these qubits, the faster my computer goes.
Is there still a collapse of the wave function phenomena? I mean, like it's a 0. It could be a 0 or 1 or whatever, but is there a point where it's recorded and then it becomes a 0 or a 1? Is there still that what they call collapse of the wave function?
Well, the classic wave function, you have to be careful because you're leaving the application and going into the architecture of the processor. And what it does in the application side with the wave functions and the superpositioning and everything else is down in the weeds in a way when it comes to looking at how quantum computing and cybersecurity are going to work with each other. And that's some of the difference between that noisy intermediate scale and what true quantum computing is being, is the steps it's taking to get through the things like the classic wave and others to get there.
Mr. Jason, anything you need to clarify or anything you want to add, Mr. Jason? Okay, thank you. Mr.
No,
Adam.
that was awesome.
Okay.
Thank you, David. It was nice. It's cool to meet you. I've been wanting to meet you, by the way. I got mad. I loved what you was talking about the other day about how that we process some things chemically and not just digitally in our brain and stuff. Right. So that was Anyway,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
Yes, Mr. Adam. Yes.
very much, Sharif. Cybersecurity. This will sound dramatic and paradoxical, but technology at any level, no matter how advanced, always has weak spots that can be exploited, and there will always be some secret way in or some backdoor entrance to sneak in. The most 100% secure technology is no technology really, no technology at all in a completely natural Garden of Eden like oasis, Luddite primitivist's dream. Technology, machines, networks, by their very nature, are always hackable, or always porous somewhere. And the technology is freewheeling exponentially, so much that I think gaps in knowledge between experts at the top and laymen beneath them will continue to grow and grow, creating a tech-savvy upper class with the privilege of knowing how to run a digital smart panopticon, keeping an eye on the masses who may not even be aware of its existence, because fourth industrial revolution tier smart technology could render such a panopticon invisible to those being spied on, until it's too late when someone says the wrong thing, asks the wrong question, tweets something verboten and politically incorrect, and yes, even think the wrong thought. And thought crime may well be dealt with very efficiently in a smart city where the ground might open up underneath the offender's feet, sucked into the ground through the tubes of some penal network, never to be seen again from friends or family ever again. So yes, I think we have reached the point, or we have passed the point already, where it is proper and appropriate now to address the threat of punitive measures against thought crime, because it's coming. Lots of things have come to pass where even just a couple of months ago, such developments were dismissed as crazy talk, like the medical apartheid we see on the news in places like Australia, Austria. So we do need to sit down and discuss seriously how to prevent and safeguard against the threats that cybersecurity, or rather emerging cyber surveillance or smart surveillance, pose to our privacy, freedom, our own mind, self-sovereignty. For the moment, one's mind is still the last bastion of freedom, sovereignty, of flexing one's own free will at liberty. And even then, I'm not so sure. Maybe the military has something invasive with regards to this, 30 years ahead of anything we know of in the mainstream or the main corpus of digital public and private lifestyles. Again, how much longer can that fortress protect our mind, soul, consciousness, free will from mind reading tech? Reading anyone's mind in super high definition is the final frontier of technological security and surveillance, and maybe it will be sugar-coated with stories about being able to record dreams, but this is something that makes me very uneasy, but it's a compelling subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martley.
Interesting. Y'all brought up cybersecurity. It was actually a conversation that I was having yesterday in another session I was in one of the whole clubhouse kind of spaces and things of that nature, because they were actually talking about the creation of metaverses and a lot of things along those lines. And that's where the question of security came up, because one of the things that they were talking about was if you decided to create a new identity, which a lot of people may be doing in either AR or VR, and that whole metaverse space, would you not be opening yourself up to some cyber threats if you decided to become something that you are not? So therefore, you might decide that you wanted to be the Michael Jordan of the day, because you can create that image in those kind of spaces and things along those lines, even if you might not have those necessary skills, say a Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods did back in their heyday, or Roger Staubach, even if you want to go back into football and things along those lines. So that became a question. And then people were thinking about how security, and particularly computer security, has already created waves, kind of what Adam was talking about already, where people are being attacked. I know that I've had family members that have had their identity stolen briefly from banks, as well as had other kind of things. And of course, there's the old notion of catfishing, where people might create one image and then it turns out that they are something totally different, and they might be doing that either to try to garner you into giving them cash, or garner you into relationships that are not the reality of what the person is, whatever that reality is in terms of looks and things of that nature. So that's one of the things that was just crossing my mind as we were talking about cybersecurity. And I'd love to hear David's thoughts about that, because I do know a lot of people that are the more civilian kind of folks like myself, and more in the journalism and the entertainment field. We're always concerned about the privacy part of it, even if we're going into quantum. And to be perfectly honest with both Davids, when I was thinking about quantum and everything, I was actually thinking about a very popular series that may be coming back in a reboot at some point or another, but it was a series that I loved as a young man and everything. And that was, of course, the show Quantum Leap, which was about time travel and things along those lines. And it was definitely a great show. And I don't know if that's, even as we're going further into this quantum space, if that's even going to be a possibility. Because I mean, some of the things that we thought were never possible have now become more and more possible, including the Jetson car. So will we actually get to the point where time travel is a real thing, or is this something that is a still stays in the realm of science fiction? So like I said, I love that show Quantum Leap, and I'm going to turn my comments back over to the two Davids, since they are the experts, and see if that is a reality. Not sure how I feel about having my molecules dissolved and then reappear in someplace else, which is kind of the theory behind both Quantum Leap and some of the Star Trek movies and everything. But hey, some people may be into that, and as long as you can come back in your original form, it might be an interesting experiment. So both Davids, is quantum ever going to really be a real thing, or is that just a thing of fiction that will stay a thing of fiction?
Thank you, thank you, thank you. There are some questions from audience. I want to take question for our speakers. Mr. David Schumacher, is quantum computing a cybersecurity threat? Onika Shams.
Well, it will be. Now, the big question is when. I don't see that quantum computing is an if. It's more like a when will it be practical to use, and when will we know that it's being used? There was some reference that was made to military applications, intelligence applications. Many times we don't know that a threat is being exercised until we have evidence of it.
Right.
And we don't know how long it took for us to determine what that is. So yes, it's a threat. And as I said in my opening remarks, we're aware of that threat and have been for 5-6 years. And there are agencies and private business that are taking into account those threats. And there are mitigation strategies that we can use today, even before the threat surfaces. We'll continue to need to be able to risk assess as we move on, because we can try to lay out a roadmap for, say, a huge data center that's processing perhaps e-commerce information. We can take what's most important and we can put the resources that we have today and apply that in the most sensitive areas. That's what I mean by rack and stack. We take a look at all the risks that we have and we prioritize them, and we place that then again in the matrix against what assets do I have today that I can use, and start applying those in a top-down situation in our risk assessment. And then people like me build plans that we submit to the management of the companies that we work with or the government agencies that we work with, and lay out what we realistically think we need over a period of time to be able to mitigate these threats. And in doing so, we say these are the possible problems that we have, these are the current solutions that we have, this is what we need. And it comes down to, how much money am I going to be authorized to be able to implement these and be able to execute over a period of time? I also have to look at staffing and say, even if I have the money that's given to me, do I have the expertise to be able to roll this out, test it, and then validate the situation, and then keep looking back to something like the National Bureau of Standards as they develop standards for protection in this area, and how well is what I'm doing living up to that. And I'm going to have to make changes over time, and I'm going to have to go back to management and explain those changes in different directions. So what I guess I'm trying to say is, yes, it's a threat. There's things that we can do, and it's a constant process moving forward to be vigilant to be able to protect this data. So it's a mixed bag. The bad news is we know there's a problem. The good news is we know there's a problem, and we can do something with that.
Thank you, sir. Mr. David Smith, I want to take a question from Mr. Noor, Madam Noor Fazrin. Do you think that quantum computer?
Sharif, I'm not hearing your audio.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
We can.
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. Mr. David Schumacher, you cannot, right? Okay. Okay. Noor Fazrin, do you think that quantum computers be hacked? Mr. David Smith.
All computers can be hacked. I mean, it really is a cat and mouse game. Quantum computing by itself is just a way to crunch numbers. But quantum computing cryptography, which is the actual encryption, is what can be hacked, but also the same math that gives you the encryption gives you the math to be able to hack the encryption too. So it's like cat and mouse. I do want to say one thing about it though, is that we should assume today though that there are working quantum computers.
Mm-hmm.
There's something called a lead-lag relationship. So you see things like in the United States, they were flying stealth airplanes 10 years before it became publicly acknowledged that they were flying stealth airplanes. I think you're going to see the same thing with it, quantum cryptography. And it's going to be a major impact. But the fact that NIST, the National Institute of Standards, is putting together a framework and standards for quantum encryption means it's much further away than most people realize and is very close to being commercial products, which need to have standards. And that we need to use it to keep going. So I think that answers the questions. And Sharif, I must tell you, I love the questions you get from your audience, and there's some really great insight that we get from your audience. So thank you for involving them.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. Mr. Jason, I want to take another question because they are the students. I want to share more good news. Like when we finished, we will share more good news because how World Talent Economy Forum actually contributing for this youth. Alia's question for Mr. Jason: how the world can prepare for quantum computing cyber risk? Mr. Jason.
Oh, for me?
Yes.
Oh, listen to David. Probably. That's what I'm gonna do. Because I really have no idea. I'm not. I don't really know how quantum computers work yet. So I'm gonna have to pass that ball right on over to maybe Adam or somebody.
Okay.
No, he says no.
Mr. Markley.
I'm not going to take it either. I think I'm going to pass it back to the Davids too, even though I do have I do have maybe a couple of theories and everything, but I'm going to pass it to the Davids since they're the experts.
Okay.
Wow. Quantum computing is just, you have to change your mind. And, if you look at how the world can prepare for quantum computing cyber risk, there's actually a whole mess of standards that we can do with that. And I'm going to, Sharif, I'm going to cheat with my answer with this one, if you don't mind. Last week, I gave a speech in Oklahoma City, and quantum computing was part of that speech. And in it, I actually talked about let me see if it will let me do it. Gee, it won't let me do that this way now. I need to set up differently. But the question is, how do you prepare for it? And the very first step to prepare for it is really scope what you have, assess what you have, look at what encryption technologies you're using, both your ones internally, external, and if your partners are using encryption, you have to understand the type of encryptions they're using, the types of keys they're using, how it's there. Then you need to take away and say, if quantum computing is going to succeed with quantum cryptography, you need to look at how to have a mitigation strategy. What standards to use? Do you just increase your symmetrical? Do you just increase your asymmetrical key sizes? And do you remove weak key cybers from your environment? How do you scale your infrastructure? It's going to take a lot more computing power to support the computation needs of advanced cryptography. So you've got to scale it. What are your data retention policies? When do you move that level of encryption from the data you have when it's no longer needs to be that secure? And quantum encryption is going to be a huge overhead because the amount of number crunching you're going to have to do. So you're going to want to protect your key data with it. How do you do quantum proof planning? And, things from NIST and others is going to be key to it. But it's how do you then put an implementation strategy in place? You want to protect your most sensitive data with the highest level of encryption you can, be it classic encryption, quantum encryption, photonic encryption, which is another way to do encryption using photons of light. There's so many different ways you can protect data, but you've got to have a plan in place on how to do it and protect everything, or just a little bit.
I actually did have a quick question. It was actually to everybody, I guess, and everything, which is kind of coming back to what they just, the question was raising and everything. And it's actually come up in several conferences and things that I've been involved in. Do we have too much power to the big five? Because like I said, if you think about the world, and actually I think Adam kind of alluded to it, if you think about the big five technology companies, and I knew during the summit, somebody had mentioned technocracy, like, technological democracies where the people that know a lot of information about technology are the ones that are in control because they know more information. And those of us that are civilians don't necessarily have the education or the background in those kind of fields. And of course, I think you got to change the name now to Mana because it used to be Fang when it was Facebook. And I'm trying to remember all the 5 elements of Fang, but it was Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google. But now that Facebook is now Meta and Google is now Alphabet, I guess you got to change the acronym to Mana. But I'm just wondering to my fellow panelists, is that a danger that we face? Is that all these have a whole lot of power? And like I said, I'm the biggest fan of innovations, but I'm wondering if it's not in the hands of too few and not spread out enough. Anybody?
Mr. Adam, Mr. Jason, anyone?
Well, I would feel better if they're in American companies' hands rather than China's.
Agreed.
But other than that, I'm not sure if there's a big danger of them all consolidating together or not. Really. I don't know. What do you think, David?
Go ahead.
Protecting one's secrets has been always key. If you go back to, for example, during the World War I, when we had the Native American speakers speaking in their native languages to be able to pass secrets and things. So this is going to be something that's here, but what really made it more important is e-commerce and being able to protect the flow of money for the common citizen. So you have encryption that protects government secrets. that's going to continue to be very complex, very big. I could actually tell you the standards that are being used today, but for this audience, maybe 0.001% would understand that part.
Mhm.
But the thing is you're going to see United States, you're going to see China, you're going to see Russia, you're going to see Israel really be the ones who are pushing the future of where quantum cryptography is going. Right now, China's ahead. China even has announced in public literature that they now can do quantum computing between a station on the Earth and a satellite in space. And doing that quantum teleportation is really there.
Adam, any thoughts? You're on mute, Adam.
Thank you. Yeah, I had quite a few thoughts. Yeah, some of what Mr. Mark Lee said got me thinking. One thing, when metaverse was mentioned, these futuristic, or now not so futuristic anymore, systems like metaverse are being praised and lauded for their capabilities, characteristics, versatility, freedom, and ideas like morphological freedom are very popular with some futurists and transhumanists, or the freedom, as per the name, to be any gender, any color, size, height, athleticism, facial features, so on, which was quite apparent with platforms that have already been in circulation for a couple of years now, like Second Life. That was a big one for a bit at some point. And that won't compare with what Metaverse will have to offer people who are keen on experimenting with that kind of thing. And as counterintuitive to think this or say this, but I think an excess of freedom, too much freedom, can be limiting paradoxically. A wonderful example of this is in the world of creativity in the arts and music too, where a lot of beautiful and timeless music has been made, composed, and recorded on quite primitive, cheap, second-hand equipment, and a lot of creative people actually freeze when they are faced with tools that can do anything, like with some advanced music software that has all the metaphorical bells and whistles. It's an effect that we like to call analysis paralysis, or simply just too much choice. So I think that systems like metaverse might create or worsen already existing identity crises, which are the negative consequences of platforms we already know and use ourselves, like social media and Facebook, which again connects with something else that Mark mentioned, particularly about catfishing. Will there be any such thing as catfishing in a world where how you look can change every day depending on what mood you're in when you wake up in the morning? And we go progressively into more extreme moods of behavior where people change every hour, where they not only look different each time, but sound different, think different even, which projects much further into the future where inventions will come centuries or decades after systems like Metaverse, where in the real world we will enjoy or not enjoy morphological freedom using nanobots or clouds of nanobots like smart swarms. So that kind of issue ties back in with the integrity of one's mind, personality, strength of free will. Like I mentioned earlier, how do you safeguard your personality? Is there any such thing as an original personality where personalities change all the time without technology? So can that be safeguarded in a world of fluid capabilities where one person could be a solid, a liquid, and a gas simultaneously? So what are the ethics of that? And that takes me to nanotechnology again being used in surveillance and indeed security as well, like with the future panopticon idea. We won't be able to see with the naked eye nanobot-sized surveillance cameras. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. David Schumacher, can you hear me?
And as a matter of fact, glad to be
Okay.
back. Yeah, I had a little
Okay.
sound issue.
Okay, understand.
May I comment on what on the last few things I just heard, or did you have another question for me?
There is a question from Mahadi. Will quantum computer can be barrier for Bitcoin? But you can respond and give the answer.
Well, maybe I can tie the two things I was thinking about together with the question about Bitcoin, because really that's a security issue. Cryptography, of course, is a key part of that, but the major factor in Bitcoin is a distributed ledger of the blockchain system. So you got a couple things going there. First, you have the secure communication, being able to transmit and receive blockchain, and that's where cryptography comes into account. And then the distributed ledger of blockchain being able to validate what has happened in an immutable record. So using combined technologies, you can not only attempt to keep the communications of that safe, but you can know, because of the immutable record, if there has been some change. So we can layer different levels of technology to be able to protect things such as Bitcoin. Perhaps the question about Bitcoin, though, maybe was less to do with the cryptography and more to do with like data mining in Bitcoin. Because so when it comes to data mining, my first thought is yes, they'll be able to solve those problems quicker in the data mining and extract Bitcoin. However, each one of the issues, if you're using Bitcoin generically, cyber currency, they usually have an upper limit where mining ceases to be a function. You have a certain amount of established coins, if you will, and then that's all that you'll have. And then we're back to the argument of being able, can we protect them in transit? And do we have sufficient ledgers to be able to know what happened? So what I want to say is there's a problem and there are solutions, and there's process that I alluded to the last time that I talked. In this country, if you drive down the road and you have a chance of speeding, and if you know you have a chance of speeding, you may have something in your car called a radar detector, because the police have radar guns to be able to definitively say that you were going too fast and take that to court. And you can use that radar signature that's out there to set off a warning in your car that lets you know that you're being monitored, perhaps coming into a radar speed trap. So why do I bring that up in this conversation? Well, it's really the same thing that goes on in security and computer systems all the time. You've got one side that is developing technology to detect, and you've got another one that's using it to be able to enforce. And it's a constant back and forth in the process, just very much like radar detectors were. So there is no definitive answer that we do one thing and we're fixed for good. It's a constant process moving forward, whether that be with Bitcoin, whether that be in the metaverse, wherever that might be. I just want to say that it's good to focus on the problems as we see them. It's good to have plans and to take action. But we humans have built into us from our evolutionary history something called human negativity bias. We tend to look at threats much more than we look at solutions. Some say it's a factor of 10 to 1. It can be more than that. That's a good thing. It's helped us all down through history and will continue to help us moving in the future if we keep proportions right. As intellectual beings, we need to be able to understand this bias that we have, not underrate it, not overrate it, and keep the proper proportions in mind as we move ahead, whether it's protecting Bitcoin or protecting data in the cloud or protecting the transmission of sensitive information. So I think maybe I wrapped up all the things I wanted to say around the Bitcoin, and I hope some of that made some sense.
Thank you, everyone. This is really great discussion, and I'm sure for our youth community it will be very, very helpful. I request all of our audience, please share our content. I just want to share some good news because we just finished our conference with Rwanda. So already, according to our commitment, we start our projects with Rwanda. We ensure job for 500 youth in Rwanda. We are working with University of Cambridge, World Talent Economy Forum, as well as we are working with International Islamic University. So our major requirement right now, we have to train our 500 students uh, for these employment opportunities, because we are economy forum. We have to focus on economic sustainabilities. Dialogue is very important, but we are not only limiting ourselves only the dialogue. We are taking action. So those who want to, from our speakers, from our audience, those who want to support our initiative, you can. Today, actually, we start we are providing scholarships around 17 students. If you want, I can share all of their name. Soon we will publish their name, because 500 students actually huge. And I want to give thanks to the our partner, those who give us the opportunity for the job opportunity for our youth communities. Beside that, in India, we are starting our another project with 600 peoples, 600 youth. So our major target, World Talent Economy Forum, what the modern science, engineering, and technology we are advocating. We will take more action for the real world. And in this COVID-19 situation, employment, economical challenges is a big challenge. So anyone want to support our initiative, because we have to train this 500, initially 500 to 600 students in Rwanda. We are developing our digital lab, and if you wish, you can sponsor a small amount of money, $100 for one per students. That is the target. And we are ensuring a very good job opportunity for the youth, but definitely they need training. Example, language is a big issue. So they have to, if they want to get the job, they need to get IELTS 7 for getting the job. It's very difficult. Example, they are not from the English language. This is their secondary language. So even though without the sponsorship, any of the speakers or audience want to train our youth, you can. Want to support our initiative with any kind of technology or anything, you can. So we are open for that. Side by side, World Talent Economy Forum now focusing on Islamic finance. This is $5 trillion economy. Muslim world, Muslim people, more than 1 billion people. So that's why the International Islamic University or many Islamic world, we are collaborating. Our next summit, soon we're going to declare on Islamic finance. We also do research on Islamic finance, and we will convert it as a ethical finance. We will find out the new solution for the Islamic world. And I believe it will solve billions of people problem. So that is the things I know. Example for today's speakers, maybe this is new for you, maybe this is new things, but we can team up and we can do more research. So these are the things we are taking initiative, and beside that, in the developing worlds, according to their demand, as much as possible with our limited ability, because we are not so big. With our limited ability, we are supporting the youth community, supporting the government. Even we are providing support to different academy. This is very, very important. This is extremely important for everyone. So I request our speakers, our audience, those who want to support World Talent Economy Forum in any format. You can sponsor any student. You can provide technical support. You can be our trainer and mentors. This is the way we will solve many complex problems together. And I believe with this kind of contributions, in between 5 years, we will reach 1 million people. And hopefully, this 1 million people will contribute for their country, will contribute for their community. So your support right now for World Talent Economy Forum, very, very important. Day and night, we are working beside this show, because some point it's very difficult to communicate with different countries and managing this kind of challenging things. But I want to say we are lucky. We are getting this kind of panels and friends and corporate partners, those who continuously support World Talent Economy Forum. Cybersecurity is very important. Besides this dialogue, anyone want to train our youth community for cybersecurity and this kind of things, you can train. So that is the things. Thank you, Honorable Speaker, Professor David Smith, Mr. Markley, Mr. David Schumacher, Jason, and Mr. Adam. And thank you for all of your support for World Talent Economy Forum. And I believe if you support more, we can solve more problems in the real world. That is our objective. That's why we said talent economy. We need to support talent, and economically we need to make them solvent. So I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. First, I want to start from Professor David Smith.
Sharif, I've really enjoyed today's show. It's one that I think your audience really needs to begin to think about and how it will impact them down the road. This is something that will impact governments first. It will then impact the commercial sector and then the individuals. But academia has a lot that can do and play with this. So my concluding remark on this really is particularly if you're an organization, don't wait for the standards to be set. We're seeing standards here in the United States.
Take everybody off.
Standards in China and other places like that, which are coming in place. So don't wait for those standards to be set. Start inventorying what your most important information is and where you have the greatest risk. So ask yourself, if the encryption is broken, what do you think your adversary, the person trying to do it, is going to want to break in first? And begin to look at ways to protect that and whether its encryption is vulnerable today. And then develop some priorities for using quantum resistant encryption as you plan to upgrade your infrastructure, as you upgrade your data, as you upgrade the way you're looking at your databases and transmission, as these technologies become available to help protect it. Remember, quantum cryptography has both a protection side, so a defense side, and quantum cryptography has an offensive side of let me break encryption. So again, as I've said before, it's that cat and mouse game. It's kind of like what you see with computer viruses. It's a cat and mouse game. We put protection up, then someone figures out a way around the protection. We encrypt something, and then somebody figures a way to break that encryption, so you have to be a step ahead. So particularly with encryption, you have to continue to judge it and stay up with it. It's something that if it's important to you, I would visit it around every couple of months because it's beginning to move really rapidly now. And we're seeing quantum computers that were on benches, lab benches, years ago now becoming commercial products. And IBM and Google and Amazon have all three recently announced quantum computing as a service. So as you see people like that announcing quantum computing as a service, you know it's getting close. And again, most of those are noisy, so very low level quantum like computing. But as I said, as David both said, we expect to see some general purpose quantum computing in the early 2030s. So Sharif, thank you so much, and I really enjoyed today.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor David. It's been Mr. Martley.
Another amazing show, great guest, great conversation, and I definitely look forward to being invited again in the very near future. I definitely thought it was an amazing conversation, and we learned a lot about security, and I'm looking forward to learning more about security in other conversations as well. Like me and Adam and Jason said, we were the newbies in the conversation, but we definitely had the great experts of the two Davids involved as well. So definitely learned a lot, and look forward to having some other great conversations just as you are doing this amazing work and definitely bringing a lot of knowledge both to your students and to the world. So I'm just glad to be a guest, and anytime you need me, all you got to do is holler and I will try to be there. But right now I've got to bounce because I've got other duties and other things to do. But it was a great enjoyment, and I enjoyed being on with my fellow panelists and look forward to seeing them again in the very near future.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Martley. Mr. Adam.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a good show today, and I also wanted to echo what Mr. David said. Cybersecurity is a twofold issue. As cybersecurity gets more and more advanced, so too do technologies and techniques to circumvent all of that. It's a chicken and egg effect feedback loop, and both of them are racing each other as they both become exponentially more and more sophisticated. So, yeah, strap yourselves in. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jason.
Yeah, I'm wondering about this project you got going in Rwanda. We have well, he's a USTP ambassador to Uganda. I don't know the political environment if the two countries are friends. They're right next to each other. I know that much, but I actually was talking to him just the other day and was telling him that I should introduce you. But yeah, he might be able to help out on that project. And are you using your website for them?
Yes, definitely. Website, social media, and definitely we're using different software for training the youth community, and definitely those who want to train the youth community, they can join. And yes, from University of Cambridge, we get offer employment opportunity for the youth, and hopefully it will be very very interesting journey. Even from Malaysia and other Asian countries, they are offering employment, and definitely there is a very very critical process, uh, their language requirement, skill sets, so if they can fulfill, they can achieve the objective, but our team working very closely with them. Yeah, and definitely we want to
What's some of the main things are you wanting like is English
first
a big
first we are focusing on the healthcare industry. So yes, we have to train them English because they have to achieve IELTS 7 for getting this job. So English requirement is very important right now. So yeah,
cool?
yes.
I'll help a little
Thank you.
here and there when I got time.
We are open for everyone. We are open for everyone. And any good things, because we need faculty, we need technology, we want to develop our lab, and actually we have a big requirement from Asia Pacific, but we have to develop step by step, because when we take actions we need financial support and everything. We are working on that area, so anybody who want to join in our team, we are open. Yes. Yes, Mr. David Schumacher, uh, what's your concluding remarks?
Well, Sharif, I want to start by thanking you for all that you're doing. Listening to your updates are very inspiring, and taking what we talk about here, placing it in the hands of people that can use it, uh, that can learn, and you're facilitating that. That's a wonderful thing that you're doing, and you're to be commended for it. So glad to be a small part of what you're doing, but you're the focus of that. So my concluding remarks for today's conversation about what we had is what I want to leave you with is, on this topic, as many others, what we need to do is prepare for our future. We need to continue to learn. Then we need to plan. And then we need to deploy systematically, put it into action, and then repeat. It's back to the process that I was talking about before. Also, there's excellent employment opportunities in this. This is a field that is just beginning to grow. And this is an area that your students, if they have an interest in this sort of thing, can really make a bright future for themselves, the way I see that. Because people coming into this will be learning, and people that have been in this for a while are all learning, and that tends to level the playing field as we move through new technologies like that. So learn. That's and then put it into action. Thank you, Sharif, once again. Really appreciate all that you're doing in the world.
Thank you, Professor David Smith, Schumacher, Professor David Smith, Mr. Jason, and Mr. Adam, for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forums. And yes, we need support from Transhumanist Party, we need support from Tando, we need support from all of the people, those who join in World Talent Economy Forum, and we have to work as a team, because individually I cannot do anything. But as a team, if we work together, we can solve many problems. And I'm sure those who join World Talent Economy Forums, everybody has vision to contribute for the human beings. And this world is so big. And I always say developing nations has a lot of problems. They need a lot of solutions. So your contributions will be very, very effective for the developing world. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. I request all of our audience, please share our content with your government, with your corporations, and with your academy. Thank you everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.